The bell for first period hadn't even rung yet, but the hallway of Jefferson Middle School was already a full-volume symphony of slamming lockers, shouted jokes, and squeaking sneakers. In the middle of all that noise, a boy named Leo moved like a quiet comma in a run-on sentence. He was 12, with hair that always looked like he'd just forgotten about a hat, and he carried his backpack so it didn't thump against his sides. His eyes, a calm kind of brown, were usually fixed on the floor tiles, counting them or following the pattern, anything to avoid the casual, glancing contact that might lead to someone expecting him to talk. Talking was the thing. For Leo, words weren't easy friends you could call up any time. They were more like shy, scattered birds. When a teacher called on him, his mind would fill with the right answer, clear as a picture. But getting it from his mind to his mouth felt like trying to push those birds through a narrow, tangled tunnel. They'd get stuck, bump into each other, and sometimes only one would make it out at a time. A hard C sound would repeat, cold, before the rest of the word front would finally break free. His face would grow warm, and he'd feel the eyes of the class on him, not mean, but heavy. So, he'd learned the art of being invisible. He sat in the middle of rows, never in the front or the back. He nodded instead of speaking. His world was built of silent actions. His sanctuary was two places. The first was the library during lunch. While the cafeteria echoed with a terrifying chaos of laughter and clattering trays, the library was a cathedral of quiet. Here, words were on the page, and they didn't fight him. He could take them in at his own speed. He wasn't a fiction guy. He went straight for the worn books in the 600s applied science, engineering, how things work. He would lose himself in diagrams of suspension bridges, cross-sections of jet engines, and blueprints for simple machines. His fingers would trace the lines on the page, as if he could feel the structure through the paper. His second sanctuary was his own bedroom desk. It was here that the silent pictures in his head found a way out, not through his voice, but through his hands. He filled sketch pads with drawings that were less art and more instruction manual. He drew a multi-level treehouse with a pulley system for a snack basket. He sketched a bicycle attachment designed to charge a phone as you pedaled. His pencils moved with a confidence his voice never had, each line deliberate, each detail precise. He didn't just draw ideas. He thought in 3 dimensions, in cause and effect, in silent, beautiful function. The announcement came over the scratchy school intercom one Tuesday morning. The voice of the principal, Mr. Henderson, boomed into every classroom. Attention, future scientists and innovators. The annual Jefferson Middle School Science Fair is 6 weeks away. This year's theme is Solutions for Tomorrow. We want to see your brightest ideas for improving our world. See your homeroom teachers for registration packets. Top projects go to the district finals. In Mrs. Gable's homeroom, a buzz went through the class. Kids immediately started whispering about volcano models, again, baking soda rockets, and which plants grew fastest. Leo didn't whisper. He felt a jolt, like a tiny, perfect circuit had been completed in his brain. A solution for tomorrow. For weeks, he'd been reading about water scarcity, about communities where clean water wasn't a given. In his sketch pad, right after the pedal-powered phone charger, were several pages of careful sketches, a system of tubes, chambers, and filters. It was a water purification model designed to be built from recycled, everyday materials: plastic bottles, sand, gravel, charcoal, and sunlight. It wasn't just a demonstration. In his mind, it was a real small-scale answer to a real big-scale problem. This was his chance to show it. For 3 days, Leo worked on his proposal after school. He wrote out the scientific principles: sedimentation, filtration, adsorption. He listed every material he'd need: 2-liter soda bottles, fine sand, coarse gravel, activated charcoal from the pet store, cheesecloth, a simple magnifying glass for a solar distillation backup. He redrew his diagrams on fresh paper, making them neater, clearer. This was the most important thing he'd ever put together. It felt like packing his entire quiet self into a few sheets of paper. On Friday, he waited until the other students had filed out of homeroom. The room smelled like whiteboard markers and old textbooks. Mrs. Gable was at her desk, sorting papers with brisk efficiency. She was a good teacher, most people said, organized. She liked things done correctly and presented properly. Her own students won spelling bees and essay contests, where clear elocution and polished delivery were key. Mrs. Gable? Leo's voice was barely a whisper. He had to say it again, a little louder, the M in Mrs. catching for a second. She looked up, her glasses perched on the end of her nose. Yes, Leo? Did you forget something? He held out his proposal packet, his hands suddenly clammy. My science fair. My project. She took the papers, giving him a quick, perfunctory smile. All right, let's have a look. She started reading. Leo watched her face. At first, it was neutral. Then her eyebrows drew together slightly. She flipped a page, her eyes scanning the dense lists and detailed drawings. She let out a small sigh, almost inaudible, but Leo heard it. It was the sound of a problem being identified. Leo, she said, setting the papers down. This is very ambitious. Very complex. He nodded, a spark of hope flickering. Complex was good, wasn't it? The science fair, she continued, choosing her words carefully, isn't just about the project. It's about the presentation. You stand in front of judges, other students, parents. You have to explain your hypothesis, your process, your results. You have to answer questions on the spot. She looked at him, not unkindly, but with a firm practicality. This is a lot to explain. And with your? She gestured vaguely, searching for a polite term. With your difficulties with speaking, I'm worried this might be too much. The presentation is half the grade. Maybe you should consider something simpler. A crystal growing experiment, perhaps? Or a model of the solar system. Something where the display does most of the talking. The spark in Leo's chest fizzled and died, replaced by a cold, heavy lump. She didn't see the project. She saw the stutter. He couldn't find any words, not even the stuck ones. He just took his proposal back, the paper feeling flimsy and foolish now, and walked out of the room on legs that didn't quite feel like his own. Later that afternoon, in the teacher's lounge, Mrs. Gable poured herself a cup of coffee. The room smelled of stale coffee and microwave popcorn. Another teacher, Mr. Dalton, who taught history, was grading papers at the small table. Tough day? Mr. Dalton asked, not looking up. Oh, the usual, Mrs. Gable said, sitting down with a weary sigh. Trying to steer my students toward successful choices. Young Leo just gave me his science fair plan. An elaborate water filtration thing. Incredibly detailed drawings. I'll give him that. The boy has a mind for mechanics. Sounds impressive, Mr. Dalton mused. It is. And it isn't, Mrs. Gable said, lowering her voice slightly. It's too impressive for him. You've heard him in class. It takes him a full minute to get a sentence out. The judges will lose patience. The other kids might snicker. It's a high-pressure situation. She took a sip of coffee, her voice dipping into a tone of confidential concern. I just told him he should scale it back. Do something simpler. I don't want to see him up there, struggling. He'll embarrass himself. Honestly, it would be kinder. Mr. Dalton nodded slowly, a non-committal, thoughtful sound in his throat. Presentation is important, he agreed, not wanting to argue. What they didn't know was that the door to the copy room, which was attached to the lounge, had been left ajar. A student, a girl from the 8th grade, who was making copies for the school newsletter, had heard every word. She heard the pity in Mrs. Gable's voice. She heard the final crushing sentence. "He'll embarrass himself." The girl finished her copies, her face hot with a mix of anger for Leo and the guilty thrill of hearing a secret. By the time the final bell rang, the secret was no longer a secret. It was a piece of gossip, traded quietly between classes, a sad, juicy piece of news about the quiet kid and the science fair. It traveled through the bloodstream of the school, from locker to locker, until it reached a friend of a friend who, out of a twisted sense of kindness, felt Leo should know what the teachers really thought. They found him at his usual lunch table in the library, his head bent over a book on hydraulic engineering. The friend of a friend slid into the seat across from him, not meeting his eyes. "Hey, Leo, I heard something. About you and the science fair." Leo looked up, his guard instantly up. "From my sister." She was in the copy room. She heard Mrs. Gable talking to Mr. Dalton. The boy fidgeted, then just blurted it out, wanting to get the unpleasant task over with. "She said your project was too much. That with your talking. You'd embarrass yourself up there. She said it would be kinder if you just did something easy." For a moment, Leo didn't move. He didn't breathe. The words didn't just land on him. They poured into him, filling up all the empty spaces where his hope had been. Embarrass himself. The cold lump from Mrs. Gable's room solidified into a hard, sharp stone in his gut. He saw it all clearly. The pitying stares of the judges, the muffled laughs from the back of the gym, Mrs. Gable's "I told you so" look. The library, usually so peaceful, suddenly felt like it was pressing in on him. The silent books witnesses to his shame. The other boy, seeing Leo's pale, frozen face, muttered a quick, "Sorry, man," and hurried away. Relieved his duty was done, Leo sat alone in the quiet. He looked down at his hands, which had drawn those plans, which knew how to build. He thought about the water system, about the clean water flowing from something dirty and discarded. And then something unexpected happened. The sharp stone of shame didn't dissolve into sadness. Instead, it got hot. A slow, burning heat spread from his stomach to his chest, to his fingers. It wasn't the hot flash of embarrassment he was used to. It was different. It was fuel. Embarrass himself. They didn't see his project. They saw his stutter. They saw a problem to be managed, not a person with an idea. They'd already written the ending to a story that hadn't even happened yet. Leo slowly closed the book on hydraulics. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He wouldn't cry. He wouldn't quit. He looked at his hands again, the hands that could speak a language Mrs. Gable didn't understand. A silent, determined thought crystallized in his mind, as clear and structured as one of his own diagrams. "Okay," he thought. "We'll see." The stone of shame that had settled in Leo's gut didn't vanish after that lunch hour in the library. It transformed. It became a weight he decided to carry, a hard, dense core of resolve. The words "embarrass himself" played on a loop in his mind, not as a prediction anymore, but as a challenge. A quiet, fierce rebellion began to simmer inside him. He walked through the rest of the school day in a kind of tunnel. The noises of the hallways, the chatter in class, it all sounded muffled and far away. He was thinking in diagrams and lists. He saw his water purification system, not just as a project for a grade, but as a physical answer. It was the only language he had left that they might understand. But he knew he couldn't build it alone in his bedroom. He needed space. He needed tools. And though he hated to admit it, he needed an adult. But not just any adult. Not someone who would focus on how the words came out. He needed someone who listened to what the hands were doing. His eyes landed on Mr. Davies, The shop teacher was a school legend in his own quiet way. He was a man of maybe 3 sentences per class, a towering figure with thick, scarred hands that looked like they'd been carved from old wood. His classroom, officially the Industrial Arts Lab, was a cavernous room that smelled permanently of sawdust, machine oil, and effort. It wasn't a quiet room. It was filled with the shriek of the band saw, the rhythmic thumping of the drill press, the solid thwack of a hammer, but it was a room where noise had a purpose. It was a room where things were made, not just discussed. Leo had never taken shop class. It wasn't on his schedule. But he'd passed the open door sometimes and seen Mr. Davies showing a kid how to clamp a piece of wood straight, or demonstrating a cutting technique with slow, exaggerated movements. The teacher's voice, when he used it, was low and gravelly, but he never seemed to rush. He showed, he pointed, he demonstrated. Words were optional. The final bell rang. Instead of heading for the library or the front doors, Leo turned toward the far end of the school, his proposal folder clutched tight to his chest. The halls were emptying quickly, the energy of the day rushing out like air from a balloon. The door to the shop lab was open, and the sounds of cleanup came from within, the clatter of tools being returned to a pegboard, the swish of a wide broom on concrete. Leo stood in the doorway, hesitating. Mr. Davies was at his desk in the corner, marking something in a ledger. He looked up, his face neither friendly nor unfriendly. Just waiting, Mr. Davies? Leo's voice was thin in the big room. The teacher gave a single slow nod. I need to build something. For the Science FF Fair. The stutter felt louder here in the quiet after the bell, more exposed. Leo's face grew warm. He forced himself to step forward, to lay his folder on the cluttered desk. He opened it to the first diagram, a detailed cross-section of his purification system. This, Mr. Davies put down his pen. He didn't look at Leo. He looked at the drawing. He studied it for a long time, his rough fingers tracing the lines on the page, following the flow of water from the dirty intake chamber through the layers of filtration to the clean collection model. He flipped to the next page, the materials list. Then to the next, a schematic for a simple solar still using a magnifying glass. The silence stretched. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. Another adult would see a problem. Another adult would see the stutter first. Finally, Mr. Davies's eyes lifted from the paper and met Leo's. They were a pale, watery blue, surrounded by fine lines. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked, really looked, at Leo, and then back at the plans. Activated charcoal, Mr. Davies said, his voice like stones grinding together. He tapped the item on the list. For adsorption, Leo managed to say, the scientific term coming out smoothly, practiced. It grabs the impurities chemicals can't filter out. Mr. Davies gave another nod. He leaned back in his chair, which creaked in protest. His gaze swept over his domain, the workbenches, the tool racks, the bins of scrap wood and plastic. Presentation is half the grade, he said, repeating the known rule. It wasn't a question. Leo's shoulders slumped a little. Here it came. The warning. But this, Mr. Davies said, his thick finger coming down on the diagram with a soft thump. This isn't a presentation. This is an engine. He said the word with a kind of respect. An engine doesn't talk. It works. A spark, the first one since the library, flickered inside Leo. Gable thinks I'll embarrass myself, Leo said, the words tumbling out in a rush he couldn't stop. He hadn't meant to say it, but the stark honesty of the shop teacher seemed to pull the truth from him. Mr. Davies was quiet for another long moment. He looked out at the empty workbenches. I had a student, he said slowly, years back. Couldn't read a paragraph out loud to save his life. Stumbled over every word. He turned his gaze back to Leo. Built a working scale model of a suspension bridge from toothpicks. Took him all semester. Judges at the state fair asked him one question. He pointed to the load-bearing joint and said, "Look." Then he put a 2-pound weight on it. The bridge held. He got the ribbon. Mr. Davies paused. Sometimes you gotta let the work do the talking. He stood up, a big man unfolding from a small chair. "Materials are in the back," he said, jerking his head toward a storeroom. "We got plastic tubing. Got scrap plexiglass. Got glue, clamps, sealant." He started walking toward the workbenches. And Leo, after a stunned second, scrambled to follow. "Judges aren't scientists," Mr. Davies said over his shoulder as he pulled a heavy, clear plastic bin from a shelf. "They're people. They see a kid who can make an idea real. They pay attention." He set the bin down. It was full of odd plastic parts, connectors, leftover pieces from old projects. "Your job is to make it so real, so clean, that the idea is obvious." He handed Leo a tape measure. "Figure out your scale. How big does it need to be to show the process? Not to tell it, to show it." For the next hour, they didn't talk about the presentation. They talked about diameter. They debated the flow rate of water through coarse gravel versus fine sand. Mr. Davies showed Leo a heat gun in a corner, used for bending plastic smoothly. "Clean joints," he grunted. "No leaks. A leaky system looks like a mistake. A sealed system looks like a plan." As the late afternoon sun slanted through the high, dusty windows of the shop, filling the air with motes of sawdust that looked like floating gold, Leo felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Calm, purpose. His hands, holding a piece of clear tubing, were steady. Here, his stutter didn't matter. Here, a bent joint or a poor seal was the problem to be solved, not the sound of his voice. Can I come back? After school?" Leo asked, putting the tubing carefully into the bin with his other gathered parts. Mr. Davies was already sweeping up a pile of wood shavings. "I'm here till 5, he said, not looking up. "Doors open if you're working." That was all. No pep talk. No promises. Just an open door. Leo walked home that day with his backpack full of possibilities. A length of tubing, a bag of connectors, a sense of direction. The heavy stone in his gut was still there, but it was no longer just shame. It was ballast. It was the weight that kept him steady. He spent that evening at his desk, but he wasn't just drawing anymore. He was calculating. He was revising his plans based on the materials he'd seen. His bedroom became a satellite workshop. His mother, bringing in laundry, paused in the doorway, seeing her quiet son surrounded by sketches and scribbled numbers, a fierce concentration on his face she hadn't seen in a while. "Science fair?" she asked gently. He nodded, not looking up. "Yeah, you seem focused." "I am," he said. And he was. The next afternoon, and the next, and every afternoon after that, Leo went to the shop. Sometimes Mr. Davies was there, offering a silent tip using a certain clamp for a better hold, suggesting a different adhesive that dried clear. Most of the time, he was at his desk or helping other students, leaving Leo in his own world of making dots slowly. Under Leo's careful hands, the idea became real. A plastic chamber was cut, sanded smooth at the edges, and sealed. Layers of cheesecloth, gravel, sand, and charcoal were measured and set into their sections. A system of valves, made from simple tubing and clips, allowed him to control the flow. It was a quiet, meticulous kind of magic. Each connection that held, each seal that didn't leak, felt like a silent word in his defense. A word made of plastic and function, not of stumbling syllables. He was building his argument, screw by screw, seal by seal. And for the first time, he started to believe it might be an argument he could win. The project was real now. It sat in the corner of Mr. Davies's shop, a collection of clear plastic chambers and tubes, looking more like a strange, scientific sculpture than a school project. Leo could pour water into the top, and after a slow, satisfying trickle through the layers, clear water would emerge from the bottom. It worked. The quiet engine, as Mr. Davies called it, was alive. But the science fair wasn't just about the engine sitting on a table. The date was getting closer, printed in bold on flyers all over school. The knowledge of it was a constant, low hum in the back of Leo's mind, like the buzz of the fluorescent lights in the shop. He could feel the weight of it, the pressure. He had built the thing. Now he had to stand in front of people and talk about it. The old fear, which had been pushed aside by the focus of building, crept back in. His hands didn't shake when he held a heat gun, but the thought of holding a microphone made his palms go damp. He was in the shop one afternoon, testing the flow rate for the 10th time, when Mr. Davies walked over, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. He didn't say anything at first, just watched the water make its slow journey. "Fair's in 10 days, Mr. Davies said, his voice breaking the comfortable silence of whirring fans. Leo nodded, his throat suddenly tight. He pointed to the system. "It works." "That's step 1, Mr. Davies agreed. "Step 2 is getting the judges to see it works, and why it matters, without you having to give a speech like a politician." Leo looked at him, hopeful. This was the problem he didn't know how to solve. Mr. Davies pulled up a stool. "Think like a judge." They walked through a gym full of kids yelling about volcanoes. They're tired. Their feet hurt. They got a list of 30 projects to see. They come to your table. What do they need to know fast? Leo thought. The problem. What it does. How it works. Right, so you don't tell them. You show them. Let the project speak first. Mr. Davies pointed a thick finger at the system. You need a big clear sign. Not paragraphs. Bullet points. Big letters. Problem. Unsafe water. Solution. Multi-stage filtration. Key feature. Built from recycled materials. Make the idea land before you even open your mouth. It made sense. It was like labeling the parts of a machine. Leo felt a flicker of relief. He could make a sign. That was just another piece of building. Then, Mr. Davies continued, you got their eyes. Now you need their hands, their brains. You gotta make them see the process. Don't just tell them the water gets clean. Show them the dirty water going in. He grabbed an empty soda bottle from a recycling bin. Fill this with water. Add some dirt, some leaves. Make it look nasty. Have it ready? Then you demonstrate. You pour the nasty stuff in the top, and you let your machine do the talking while it works. People will watch. It's like a little performance. The slower it filters, the more they have to think about what's happening inside. Leo could picture it. The silent, working model. The judge watching the transformation. It was powerful, but Leo's voice caught. They'll ask questions. I have to. Talk. Mr. Davies nodded, not dismissing the fear. Yeah, you do. So you prepare for those too. You know your stuff better than anyone. The questions will be about the project. Why charcoal? How did you seal this joint? What's the flow rate? Those are questions you can answer. They're about facts, not feelings. He leaned forward. Here's what you do. You practice the hardest thing first, the beginning. You walk up to the judge, you look them in the eye, and you say one sentence. Just one. Make it a good one. You practice that one sentence in your room, in the shower, walking to school, until you can say it in your sleep. You own that one sentence. Leo thought hard. What was the one thing he wanted them to know right away? He didn't want to say hello or my project is about. It had to matter. He scribbled on a piece of shop paper, asterisk, this model turns contaminated water into drinkable water using simple, available parts. Asterisk, it was long. He scratched it out. Too many words. He tried again. Asterisk, this system can make dirty water safe. Anywhere dot asterisk better. Shorter. It said what it did and why it mattered. Good? Mr. Davies grunted, reading over his shoulder. Now, for the rest, you don't memorize a speech. You memorize a tour. You're a guide. Your project is the museum. You point to the sign for the big idea. You point to the first chamber and say sedimentation. You point to the gravel layer and say large particle filtration. You let the labels and the machine do the heavy lifting. Your words are just signs on the path. For the next week, Leo's world became a cycle of preparation. After school, he worked in the shop, perfecting the machine. He made sure every connection was flawless, every layer perfectly leveled. He created a large, sturdy poster board with bold, clear lettering and simple diagrams. He used a ruler for every line, making it as clean and professional as his model dot at home. In the privacy of his room, he practiced. He set up his desk as if it were his fair table. He put his poster on one side, his model in the middle, and his bottle of contaminated water, a mix of tap water, a little coffee grounds, and some torn-up spinach leaves on the other. He faced his bedroom mirror. He took a deep breath, the way Mr. Davies had told him to. A deep breath from the stomach, not the chest. He looked at his own reflection, trying to see a judge. This system, he said to the mirror, his voice firm on the first word, then catching on the S. Can make dirty water safe. Anywhere. He stopped. He hadn't gotten it perfectly smooth, but he'd gotten the idea out. The core of it was there dot. He didn't start over. That was another rule. If you stumble, Mr. Davies had said, you pause. You let the stumble be. Then you keep going. Starting over tells everyone it was a mistake. Keeping going tells them it was just a bump in the road. Leo tried again, not the sentence, but the next part. He turned to his imaginary judge and pointed to the poster. It uses F4 stages. Then he turned to the model, his hands moving naturally to it, his fingers touching the first chamber. His voice was softer here, more confident. He wasn't talking to a face. He was talking about his work. First, sediment, ation. The heavy stuff settles here. His hand moved to the next layer. Then, large part. Eichel filtration in the gravel. Each time he pointed to a physical part, the words came easier. The stutter was still there, a hitch here and there. But it was woven into the explanation, not blocking it. His mother listened from the hallway sometimes, hearing the quiet, determined voice practicing its tour. She never interrupted, just smiled a small, worried, proud smile. The day before the fair, Leo went to the shop for one last check. The project was packed carefully into a sturdy cardboard box, the poster rolled in a tube. The gym would be set up that evening. Mr. Davies looked at the box, then at Leo. You ready? Leo thought about it. He wasn't ready to be a great speaker. He knew the stutter would be there, a familiar, stubborn companion. But he was ready to show his work. He was ready to let the engine run. He knew his one sentence. He knew his tour. I'm ready to show them, Leo said. And he meant it. Mr. Davies gave one of his rare, almost invisible nods of approval. Then show them. Let the thing work. The rest is just details. That night, Leo lay in bed, not with tossing and turning anxiety, but with a steady, thrumming nervous energy. He pictured the gym, loud and chaotic. He pictured his table. He ran through the steps in his mind, set up the poster, set up the model, place the dirty water bottle. Take a deep breath. Wait for the judge. Make eye contact. Say the sentence. Start the demonstration. The fear was still a cold spot in his stomach, but it was surrounded now by something warmer preparation. He had a plan. He wasn't going out there just with his voice, which could betray him. He was going out there with his hands, which had built something, and with his mind, which had solved a problem. He was going with a silent partner, the model itself, that would work tirelessly beside him. He finally fell asleep, his last thought a simple one. Tomorrow, the machine would get its chance to speak, and he would be there to help translate. The morning of the science fair felt different. The air in the school wasn't just charged with the usual Friday laziness. It crackled with a nervous, excited energy. From the open doors of the gymnasium, Leo could hear a dull roar of voices, the clatter of table legs, the shriek of tape being pulled from rolls. He stood in the hallway, clutching his cardboard box and poster tube, feeling like a diver on the edge of a very high, very noisy board. Mr. Davies had given him a hall pass to set up early. Leo took a deep, shaking breath and walked in. The gym was a sea of organized chaos. Long rows of tables draped with bright blue plastic cloths ran the length of the room. Students and parents buzzed everywhere, arranging trifold posters, setting up laptop displays, and carefully placing baking soda volcanoes. The air smelled of fresh poster board, hot glue, and anxiety. Sunlight streamed in through the high windows, lighting up clouds of dust motes dancing in the frenzy. Table 27. That was his spot. It was near the middle of a row, not hidden in a corner, not front and center. Just there. A neutral zone. He carefully unpacked his box. First, he unrolled his poster and fastened it to the table's backboard with clips he'd brought. The bold, black lettering stood out cleanly against the white board. Asterisk, asterisk, portable water purification. A solution using recycled materials. Asterisk, asterisk underneath. Clear diagrams and bullet points explained the stages. It looked professional. It looked quiet. Next, he placed the model itself in the center of the table. In the bright gym lights, the clear plastic chambers gleamed. The layers of gravel, sand, and charcoal were distinct and neat behind their walls. The tubing was perfectly cut, the seals invisible. It didn't look like a kid's project. It looked like a prototype. To its right, he placed his prepared bottle of contaminated water. The dark water swirled with bits of debris. To the left, he placed a clean, empty beaker to catch the output. Finally, from his backpack, he laid out a simple note card. On it, in his careful handwriting, were 3 prompts. 1. Asterisk look, shake bottle. 2. Pour, start tour. 3. Let it work. Asterisk, he stood back. His little island of order in the chaotic sea was ready. Now he just had to wait. And that was the hardest part. As the gym filled up, the noise level climbed. Laughter echoed. A volcano down the row erupted with a fizzy hiss, drawing a crowd and cheers. Leo saw kids in crisp button-down shirts talking smoothly to their parents, gesturing confidently at their projects. His mouth felt dry. He practiced his one sentence in his head, but the words seemed to tangle before they even reached his lips. Then he saw her. Mrs. Gable was walking down the aisle with a clipboard, checking on her students. She wore a bright, encouraging smile, offering pointers here and there. She approached his table, her smile still in place, but becoming tighter, more professional. Her eyes scanned his setup, taking in the poster, the model. A flicker of surprise, maybe at its cleanliness, passed over her face. "Good morning, Leo. All set?" Her voice was cheerful, but it had that same careful tone she'd used in her classroom. He nodded. unable to force his one sentence out for a practice run. Not for her. "It looks very thorough," she said, her eyes lingering on the complex tubing. He could see the unspoken thought behind her eyes, and very complicated to explain. She patted the air near his shoulder, a kind of non-contact encouragement. "Just remember to speak slowly and clearly. The judges appreciate clarity." She gave him one last smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and moved on to the next table, where a student was explaining a perfectly memorized script on plant growth. The humiliation from weeks ago, the overheard words, came rushing back. "He'll embarrass himself." They hung in the air around his table like a ghost. The old, familiar heat began to climb up his neck. He looked down at his model, at his own hands resting on the table. They were steady. He focused on that. He had a plan. Mr. Davies's voice in his head was calmer, steadier than Mrs. Gable's. Let the work do the talking. The judging began. Officials in blazers with name tags moved in pairs from table to table, spending 5, maybe 10 minutes at each. Leo watched them work their way down the opposite row. His heart was a frantic drum against his ribs. He saw a judge frown at a messy display. He saw another nod approvingly at a slick digital presentation out then. They were at the table next to his. He couldn't help but overhear. The student, a girl with a model of a solar-powered car, was talking a mile a minute, her words tumbling over each other in a rehearsed rush. The judges listened politely, asked a quick question, and moved on. They looked a bit weary, and then they turned. 2 of them. One was a tall woman with sharp glasses and a kind but no-nonsense face. The other was a shorter, older man with a thoughtful expression and eyes that immediately darted to the model, not to Leo. They stepped up to table 27. This was it. The moment. The air seemed to get thicker. Leo's tongue felt like a piece of wood in his mouth. He saw Mrs. Gable from a few tables away, watching subtly, her clipboard held to her chest. The female judge looked at his poster, then at him. "Good morning. Tell us about your project." Leo's breath hitched. His mind went blank for a terrifying second. Then his eyes dropped to his note card. "Look, shake bottle." He didn't speak. Instead, he reached for the bottle of dirty water. He held it up in front of the judges, giving it a gentle shake. The debris swirled in a murky cloud. Both judges leaned in slightly, their attention caught by the simple visual problem. Now, the sentence. He took that deep stomach breath. He made himself look at the bridge of the woman's glasses, not directly in her eyes. "This system," he said, "the sea, hissing out longer than he wanted, can make water like this. Safe." He paused, letting the short, clear statement hang in the air. He saw the male judge's eyebrows go up, not in impatience, but in interest. Then, before the silence could get awkward, before he had to string another difficult sentence together, he moved to the model. He pointed to the top chamber. Pour it here." He unscrewed the bottle and carefully tipped the dark, dirty water into the intake funnel. It was a dramatic, simple action. The judges watched, captivated, as the questionable liquid entered the clean, engineered system. Leo's hands found their purpose. As the water began its slow journey through the first sedimentation chamber, he pointed. His voice was softer, now more natural. He was talking about his friend, his creation. First stage, sedimentation, the heavy particles. They settle out here. His finger moved to the gravel layer. The water, already slightly clearer, trickled down. Second, large part, Eichel filtration. He moved to the sand. Third, fine filtration. Finally, to the charcoal. Fourth, adsorption. The charcoal grabs chemicals, bad tastes. The stutter was there. It peppered his explanation. But something incredible was happening. Because he was pointing, because the water was visibly, slowly getting cleaner as he spoke. The judges weren't just listening to his words. They were following a process. They were watching a transformation. The hitches in his speech became just pauses, moments where their eyes could catch up to what the water was doing. The male judge leaned in close, peering at the connection between the sand and charcoal chambers. "How did you ensure a seal here without contaminating the media?" he asked, his voice curious, not testing. Leo's answer was ready. It was about fact, not performance. "Food-grade silicone," he said, the technical term coming out smoothly. "Cured for 48 hours. No taste, no chemical leach." He pointed to a barely visible seam. The female judge nodded. "And the flow rate?" "It's quite slow." "That's by design," Leo explained, gaining confidence. "Slower flow means more contact time. Better purification." He tapped the valve he'd installed. "But this valve can adjust it for faster flow if the water is less contaminated." They asked more questions about where the materials came from. The plastic was from donated soda bottles, the charcoal from a pet store. About the potential scale, he had a sketch on his poster showing how it could be made larger with buckets. His answers were short, sometimes broken, but always direct. He showed them, he pointed, he used the model itself as his vocabulary. Then, the clear water began to drip, steadily and unmistakably clean, into the empty beaker. It made a soft plink, plink, plink sound. The judges watched the first few drops collect in the bottom of the clean glass. The contrast with the bottle of muck he'd started with was absolute. It was proof. Silent, undeniable proof. The female judge looked from the clean beaker to the model to Leo's face. Her professional demeanor softened into a genuine, impressed smile. "That," she said quietly, "is a remarkable demonstration of practical engineering. You didn't just explain a solution. You built a working example. Well done." The male judge was still studying the system. "The elegance is in the simplicity of the components matched with the complexity of the thought," he mused, almost to himself. He gave Leo a firm nod. "Excellent work, young man. Truly." They marked their clipboards, shook his hand, a real firm shake, and moved to the next table. Leo stood there, his heart still pounding, but now with a wild, soaring feeling. He'd done it. He hadn't given a flawless speech. He'd stuttered, he'd paused, but he'd shown them. The engine had spoken, and he had been its guide. From across the aisle, he caught Mrs. Gable's eye. She had seen the entire interaction. The tight, worried expression was gone, replaced by something else entirely. It was a look of sheer astonishness. The judging was over. The roar in the gym settled into a steady hum of relieved chatter, the buzzing of 100 conversations. The pressure was off. Parents and friends streamed in from the halls, weaving through the tables, oohing and eyeing at the projects. For Leo, the world had shrunk to the small space around table 27. He felt light, almost dizzy, like he'd been holding his breath for an hour and could finally let it go. He watched the clean water continue to drip into the beaker, a slow, steady proof. The judges were gone, but their words echoed in his mind. Remarkable practical engineering, elegance, simplicity. They weren't words about his speaking. They were words about his thinking. His hands. For the first time, someone with authority had seen past the stumbling words and looked straight at the idea. It was a feeling warmer than any trophy. He became aware of people stopping at his table. Not just a glance, but pausing. A younger kid with his dad pointed at the layers of sand and gravel. "How does it get clean?" the kid asked. Leo didn't feel the old panic. He just pointed to the first chamber. "The heavy stuff gets stuck here," he said, his voice quiet but clear. No stutter. The dad nodded, impressed, and they moved on. A couple of other students from his grade drifted over. They weren't the loud, popular kids, but a few he recognized from the library or from quiet corners of classrooms. They looked at the model with genuine curiosity, asking questions about where he got the charcoal or how he bent the plastic. He answered, short but sure. It was easy. They were talking about the work. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw Mrs. Gable again. She was making a slow circuit, talking to parents, but her path seemed to keep her at a distance from his table. When she did glance over, her smile was strained, her eyes flicking away quickly. He saw her clutch her clipboard a little tighter. He didn't feel angry anymore, or even vindicated. He just felt a kind of quiet distance from her. She lived in a world of words, of fluent presentations. He had built a bridge to a different world today. And she was still on the other side, after what felt like both an eternity and a single minute. The principal, Mr. Henderson, took the microphone at the front of the gym. The feedback squealed, making everyone wince. "May I have your attention, please? Would all our fantastic young scientists please gather near the stage for our award ceremony?" A new kind of flutter started in Leo's stomach. He hadn't really thought about awards. Surviving the judging felt like the win. But as he made his way through the crowd with the other students, he saw the table at the foot of the stage. Ribbons, gold, silver, blue. A few taller trophies. The flutter became a full-winged beat. The students clustered together, a sea of nervous energy. Leo stood near the back, half hidden behind a taller boy. Mrs. Gable stood off to the side with the other teachers. Her arms crossed. Mr. Davies was there too. Leaning against the gym wall by the fire exit, a faint smudge of sawdust on his sleeve. He gave Leo the smallest, barely there nod. Mr. Henderson started with the participation ribbons, calling out categories like most colorful display and best use of biology. The crowd clapped politely. Then came the third place ribbons in the major categories. Then the second place. The trophies for first were the last. And now, for our first place awards, Mr. Henderson boomed. First, the award for most detailed research goes to one of the girls who'd done the solar car went up, beaming, to collect the trophy. The applause was loud. Leo's heart was hammering again. He told himself it was okay. He had done what he came to do. He glanced at Mr. Davies, who just raised his eyebrows as if to say, "Wait for it." "Next," said Mr. Henderson, adjusting his glasses to read the card. "This award is for most innovative design and engineering." The judges noted that this project demonstrated not just scientific understanding, but exceptional practical problem-solving, clarity of design, and an elegant hands-on demonstration. He paused. Leo held his breath. The gym was quiet. This year's winner is Leo with his portable water purification system. For a second, the name didn't register. It was just a sound in the air. Then the taller boy in front of him turned and nudged him, grinning. "That's you, man. Go." A wave of sound-real, warm, solid applause washed over him. It wasn't the polite clapping from before. It was louder, longer. He saw the judges near the front, clapping firmly. He saw the other students from his table looking at him, smiling. He walked forward, his legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. The gym lights were bright in his eyes. He reached the stage. Mr. Henderson shook his hand firmly and placed the trophy in his hands. It was heavier than he expected, cool and smooth. A small, gold-plated figure of an atom on top. "Fantastic work, son," the principal said into his ear over the applause. "Really fantastic." Leo turned to face the crowd, clutching the trophy. He didn't raise it over his head. He just held it to his chest, a solid, real weight. His eyes scanned the blur of faces. They found his mother, standing near the back doors, her hands clasped under her chin, tears streaming down her smiling face. She gave him a little wave, and his eyes found Mrs. Gable. She was clapping, her hands coming together mechanically. The expression on her face was the most complicated thing Leo had ever seen. There was pride there, the automatic pride a teacher feels for any winning student. But underneath it was a deep, profound shock. And beneath that, a raw, unmistakable shame. Her eyes met his for just a second, and in that moment, she wasn't his teacher. She was just a person who had been completely, utterly wrong. She looked away quickly, her applause faltering, her gaze dropping to the floor as if searching for something she'd lost. The applause began to die down. Mr. Henderson gestured for him to go back to the group. As he walked off the stage, trophy in hand, he passed Mr. Davies. The shop teacher didn't say a word. He just reached out and put a heavy, steady hand on Leo's shoulder. The touch lasted only a second, but it said everything. Asterisk, I knew you could. Well done. Asterisk, the ceremony ended. The crowd began to break apart. Leo was immediately surrounded. Kids he barely knew slapped his back gently. Dude, that was so cool. How did you even think of that? His mother fought her way through and wrapped him in a tight hug, not caring about the trophy pressed between them. I am so proud of you, she whispered, her voice thick. While she talked to another parent, Leo stood by his table, packing his model carefully back into its box. The poster was a little bent at the corners now. A trophy took up space in the box. He was aware of someone standing quietly nearby. He looked up. It was Mrs. Gable. She had approached when the crowd thinned. She stood there, her clipboard held like a shield. She tried to smile, but it was weak, trembling at the edges. Leo, she began, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. That was truly outstanding. I misjudged the project. And I misjudged you? I am so very sorry for what I said. It was wrong. She looked directly at him, forcing herself to hold his gaze. The apology was real. It was difficult, and it cost her something to say it. Leo could see that. He didn't know what to say. Thank you. Didn't feel right. It's okay. Didn't feel true either, because what she'd said had hurt, and it had shaped everything. So he just nodded, a slow, accepting nod. He didn't forgive her right then, not fully, but he heard her. She seemed to understand it was all she would get. She nodded back, a quick, jerky motion, then turned and walked away. Her shoulders slumped just a little. Finally, the gym was almost empty. The janitors were starting to sweep up discarded tape and paper scraps. Leo put the last piece of tubing in the box and closed the lid. He looked at the empty table, then at the box in his hands. He thought about the long afternoons in the shop, the smell of sawdust, the feel of the heat gun. He thought about the fear, and the plan, and the quiet asterisk plink, plink, plink asterisk of the water god. He hadn't proven he was a great speaker. He hadn't silenced his stutter. He had proven something more important, that a person is more than their most obvious flaw, that intelligence has 1,000 voices. His was not in his tongue, but in the space between his idea and his hands, in the silent, patient work of making something true. He picked up the box, now holding both his engine and his trophy. It was heavier, but he carried it easily. He walked out of the bright, emptying gym, not as the boy who might embarrass himself, but as the boy who built an answer. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like a room he'd have to talk his way into. It felt like a workshop, full of parts waiting to be assembled, where his hands would always know what to do.